Why not, right? All right. We're back. We're live. So thank you for tuning in. Happy Thursday. Yes, happy Thursday, Emanuele. Happy Thursday, everybody. Um, yeah, if you don't know, if you're new here, my name is Dr. Vincent Esposito. I'm a chiropractor, holistic health person in general. Work with athletes, work with all sorts of stuff, have trainings in nutrition and breath work and uh, athletic performance. All these things are kind of my background and the folks that I work with. And really, the goal is to utilize as many tools as possible to paint a clear picture so that we can help people heal faster. That's ultimately what this is about, big picture. And if you scroll back, if you're not new to this channel, there's a lot of videos and longer form things that I've done. And I've written a bunch of stuff on my website, insideouthealthwellness.com, if you want to check some of that out. A lot of the deeper concepts, the whys are there. Whereas today we're going to be talking about the how. And what I want to do today is to kind of reset a little bit and talk about like what are the foundations? What are the essentials to heal? And these are going to be blanket across the board. The reason I say that is because I'll get folks coming into me or have been to a bunch of people or have say they have tried everything, but when you dive a little bit deeper, there's some of the foundational stuff that isn't necessarily covered. And the truth of the matter is, like with time, covering these essential 8 is going to resolve the problems for like 90 to 95% of people. It's independent of using a practitioner or help or spending thousands of dollars or going through the standard American, insurance model where you're just kind of throwing band-aids at problems, or even now the functional health model where they're just throwing tons of supplements on thousands of dollars worth of lab tests. Whereas if you just kind of got some of this stuff under control or was aware of it, you probably could have saved yourself a ton of money from the beginning and you'd just be happier and healthier long term. So today we're going over the essential 8. Now, what are the essential 8, at least for me? The first one's going to be intention. Second one is flow, and flow has 4 subcategories that we'll get into. Third is community. 4 is breath. 5 is connection to sun and earth. So that's sunlight, grounding, things of that nature. We have I said community. So we have sleep. That was the other one. Sleep, nutrition, and then movement. So if sometimes like if you really like if you have a good grasp on all 8 of those, you are going to be in a good place fundamentally, foundationally for healing. It most likely will just be a matter of time if you're on top of all of these things. Now, chances are one or a bunch of them are not on track. So I kind of want to dive into each one of these deeper in order and kind of give you, a place to start. And again, just to go over it again quickly, we have intention or purpose, we have flow, we have community, we have breath, we have connection to the sun and the earth, we have sleep, we have nutrition, and then we have movement. Those aren't necessarily in order, but I know so many people, but I feel like it's a rough order that I feel pretty comfortable with. You could argue sunlight and grounding should probably be number 1 or 2 on that list. But for now, we're going to do it in that order. So let's start with the first one. It's intention. So with any injury, pain, health challenge, you really need to ask yourself, like, what are your goals? Like, why, first of all, why do you want to be healthy? What is the reason for that? And you need to kind of like really get clear on that. Sometimes it's simple. Sometimes it's I'm playing a sport or I'm competing in something and I had an injury and I want to get back to where I was, or I want to be better than where I was. Or it could be as simple as, I have a grandchild coming and I want to be able to spend time playing with her. Like, or it could be, I am active in my 50s and 60s and I want to stay active into my 70s and 80s. like whatever that why is, and it could be for whatever reason. It's so that because that's a social outlet for me. Because I enjoy what I do. I enjoy golf. I enjoy skiing. I enjoy basketball. It doesn't matter what it is. But the point is, like, there needs to be a bigger level as to why. And if you have that, it's really important, because if you don't have that, it's really easy to see the days where it's not perfect or it's not going 100% your way and give up. So you need to have that foundational purpose why. Pain, for better or worse, is probably the best motivator we have. And unfortunately, there's a large level of suffering. There's a hurdle most people have to get over from a pain standpoint to actually make a change. But pain in and of itself isn't necessarily a bad thing. It is pain. It in many ways it can be a teacher. So I guess the challenge, or at least I would challenge you, is to use that as a teaching modality. Use that as something that you can use to get better or to learn something from. So that's a big thing. The other one is, of course, setting the intentions. Now, again, I mentioned a few, but it really doesn't matter if they're big or small or specific or general. Start general, work towards something specific if you don't have something in mind right now. And more importantly, give yourself time. Like, wherever you are today, I promise you the healing process is shorter than whatever it took for you to get there. Obviously, unless it's an acute injury. But even if it is an acute injury, usually there are imbalances or things that were going on in the past that were either asymptomatic or what have you, that could have been leading to whatever's going on, or finally feeling symptoms from, say, a liver disorder or diabetes or heart disease or kidney disease, whatever it is. Those things don't happen overnight. There is a series of events over months and years that lead to an outcome that leads to symptoms. The symptoms are the fire alarm. They are not necessarily the reason, the cause, if you will. The other thing, of course, is to have fun. Like, you need to make this stuff as enjoyable as possible. This is why with kids, and when I work with kids or athletes, or especially child athletes, and especially if they're younger, the primary goal is for them to have fun. Like, and especially in a world where we're seeing UCL tears, ACL tears at rates that are unknown before this. A lot of it, I think, has to do with specialization early, with not having fun and not having a generally good movement pattern, which I'll save that for another day. But my point here is, like, if you need action steps as far as the intention part, you need to get clear on what you want. I would make a list of the positive and negative external environment factors that are in your life. Those could be physical, chemical, or emotional stressors. I would write down 5 potential goals you want to achieve this month, this year, and narrow them down this week, this month, this year. Write them down and then start taking actions towards those. I will also say, if you keep a journal either at the end of the day or at the beginning of the day, write down a few things that you're grateful for at the end of the day, or maybe what you want to do tomorrow to kind of keep you on track. So the whole point here is to set those intentions so that you can create a foundation and environment for healing. So that's intention. Next on the list is flow. Now, flow, I'm not going to go into each of these because it's going to take way too long, but there's flow of 4 main things in the body that essentially control and dictate a lot of our health. And that is blood, lymph, nerves, and fascia. Now, blood and lymph, I've spent a number of talks like this talking about, so I'm not going to dive too deep into those. But I've talked about this before. Blood is about 20% of your extracellular fluid. Lymph is about the other 80%. We spend a lot of time talking about blood. Blood's really important, obviously. It's going to deliver nutrients and oxygen so that our cells can create and generate ATP to allow the electron transport chain to do what it needs to do so that the cells can do what they need to do, and also create that endogenous water that's actually used on the fascia for communication in our body. But there's a 8-part series on how I explain that, and I do not have the time to go into that. But I have done lectures on that if you want to go back and learn more about it. That being said, blood flow is important for that reason. Lymph is a good way to explain the blood and the lymph. Blood is effectively, it functions as the kitchen. It is the waiter, if you will. It brings the nutrition, the food, the oxygen to the cells, to the tissues that need it. The lymphatic system is responsible for cleaning it up, taking it away. It's effectively your septic system, your kidneys. You expel the waste. It's the cleanup crew. So, and it's an interesting thing that we have 4 times more lymph than blood because it has a lot, all our cells like us. And again, I've talked about this before, nature's fractal. We eat food for energy and we excrete what we don't need through pee, through poop, through sweat, through breath. Cells do the same exact thing, just on a much smaller scale. They use the things that blood gives to them, the oxygen, the glucose, the other nutrients that it needs to perform the things that it needs to do. But in the process, it excretes its own waste. I talked about this in a separate chat. We talked about how, yes, in the electron transport chain, you will see that there are reactive oxygen species that are created. Inside each cell, we actually create our own melatonin to neutralize some of those reactive oxygen species on site. This is not in the pineal gland. This does not make you sleepy. Every single one of our cells, in fact, 95% of the melatonin in our body is not coming from the pineal gland. It's coming from endogenous inside the cells, inside each cell. It never leaves the cell because it's one of the primary antioxidants to negate a lot of these reactive oxygen species that are a process that occur during the electron transport chain. So again, fractal, these are all the same processes that happen at different levels depending on which scale you're looking at. I think that's a much better way to look at it. So fractals it is kind of the way that I would talk about it. Nerves. Nerve flow is really important. Now, my background is as a chiropractor. I think most people look at us as bone doctors or spine doctors, but the truth of the matter is I think most of it has to do with nervous system function and nerve flow. Now, a lot of that, we have a central nervous system. That's our brain and our spinal cord. And then we have a bunch of nerves coming off of that go into our arms, that go into our gut, that go into our legs. And that allows us to move around and do things, right? Sometimes that flow can be impinged for a variety of reasons. It could be poor postural changes. It could be injuries. It could be any number of things. One of the great parts about chiropractic, and I don't mean to make this entire thing about chiropractic, I really don't, but one of the things it does is help regulate the flow of these things. Now, certainly, at least the way I practice, I like making it a more active component for each person. So every person that I work with will have some sort of exercise plan attached to it if we're talking about sports related type of things or even just injury related type of things, because you spend 99% of your time not with whatever practitioner you're working with. So what you do in that time is kind of important, but it also makes the type of practitioner you work with really important because you're only spending a little bit of time with them. So take that for what it is. My point is, pain and other symptoms usually don't come out of nowhere. It usually is a sign of a variety of things, and usually working with someone who is skilled, who can assess that, can be really helpful. Now, obviously, chiropractic isn't the only thing that can be helpful for nerve flow. There's also a autonomic nervous system, right? That's sympathetic, parasympathetic. So if we're constantly tense and breathing heavy and loud and worrying about the next thing that's going to happen tomorrow, and we're always in the sympathetic dominant state, that's not really good. That's where you'll see things like low heart rate variability, right? HRV, for those who use things like Oura rings or track this and however you want to track it. A wider HRV is the ability to adapt, to get in and out of sympathetic and parasympathetic mode. You can't be in both. They can't both be on at the same time. One's on or the other's on most of the time. The more time we spend in sympathetic mode impairs our ability to rest properly, to repair properly, to detox properly. So if we're constantly in a stress state, that's great if we need to get out of a life or death situation at any given time. Problem is, if we're constantly in that life or death situation, digestion gets slowed down. Detoxification gets slowed down because all of that energy, all of that blood flow goes away from those organs to the heart, to the muscles, because that is where it's needed in that sympathetic state. So Nerve flow, really important. One of the favorite things that I like to do is spinal hygiene, which is a series of moves that keeps your spine limber and loose. That will help with, again, nerve flow out to the arms, out to the legs, up to the head. A lot of that's going to be, there's 6 different moves. You're going to have neck rotation, lateral flexion, flexion extension, and then you're going to do the same thing with the trunk, but you're going to do it in a way where it's almost like an accordion or a snake. You're going to move one vertebrae at a time, flex down, and then carry over. I'm not going to demonstrate it here, but maybe that's for another video. And then you're going to come back up, extending one at a time. You're going to laterally bend one at a time, rotate each side. So there's a lot you could do. Nasal breathing is another big one. I'm going to get to that in a little bit. But all of these things are going to help with nerve flow. The other thing is unstructured play. I already mentioned this once, but play, movement of all kinds, ideally something you enjoy, especially if you're kids. Yes, could be qigong, could be a sport, could be going for a run, could be yoga. It really doesn't matter what. The goal is that you enjoy it and that you do it ideally daily. That is going to improve nerve flow, blood flow, lymphatic flow, all three already. Finally, is fascia flow. Now, what I learned, I think most people learn in school, is like when you take anatomy and you're doing anatomy dissections, kind of fascia is this connective tissue that gets cut out and kind of tossed away. But the truth is, fascia actually envelops every single organ that we have, including muscles, and it's also creates this interstitial web. I think one of the issues I had when I was in school was we kind of have that image, and I'm sure we all had this if you've taken biology back in like 3rd grade, when you learn about the animal cell and you see these individual cells that are effectively like bags of water with a couple organelles, a couple mitochondria, a little bit of endoplasmic reticulum. Yeah, big nucleus, but there's a lot of free space. In the body, that's usually not what happens. There's a bunch of connective tissue, this fascia that runs next to blood vessels, that runs next to muscles. And I've talked about this in other videos. These are all proteins, and fascia is made mostly of collagen, which is a triple helix. And most proteins, as I've talked about in other chats, all have a net negative charge, which creates a surface for water to kind of bind to, right? Because water is a polar molecule. Water has interesting properties. Water will be attracted to these negative surfaces attached to it, and you could actually create structured water within our body. So that's actually what's happening. We're having a water surface that allows for the propagation of electrons, propagation of effectively light and sound waves to happen at the speed of light and sound inside our bodies at all given times. And the fascia is that interface, that surface that it connects to. What's interesting is because it has piezoelectric and viscoelastic properties, like, say, a quartz crystal, it actually has these crystal structures. What's important with crystal? It has an order to it, right? And this order is what allows for electrons to flow in a easier way, in a more free-form way. It's not necessarily what it's made of. It is to a degree, but it's the structure of it that allows for it. This is how semiconduction occurs. The fascia plays a really, really important role with that. So having free-flowing fascia under the skin, along our blood vessels, along our muscle fibers, is all going to help actually communicate, send information in our bodies to other places. So having healthy fascia, supporting healthy fascia is really important. And how we're going to do that is we're going to cover these effectively in these other pillars. So the flow of those 4 is really important. So I want to just kind of keep that in mind, as we're going here. Community is another one. This is probably, I would say, the one, I don't want to say that gets missed the most, but I do notice that those who tend to have some sort of community, family, study group, sports group, friend group that supports them on whatever they're doing, in my practice, has been the single most accurate determining factor of is a person going to get better or not at a rate that is worthwhile. Is does that person have some sort of community that they're a part of? And it could be just a tight knit family, of course, that would be ideal. I understand that's not the case for everyone, but then okay, do you have a supporting friend group? Do you have a church group that you like? Do you have a group of friends you play cards with once or twice a week? It really doesn't matter what it is as long as it's true support and love. And that loving environment, to me, has been the number one dictating factor of is someone going to get better. So, whatever that is, I do believe prioritizing family time is really important if you have an opportunity to do it. To have some sort of family rituals are really important. To definitely reduce your time on social media. You got to be, especially nowadays, because I get it with FOMO. But these blue light things are not ideal for our health. Nothing. And this includes me, who works with people, virtually. Nothing actually beats the real thing, being in person with someone. There's a connection. There's an energetic exchange that you cannot replicate unless you're in person with someone. So, what are some things you could do to help build community? Maybe instead of calling your friend on the phone, maybe you meet them for lunch. Maybe you go to the park with them. If you're looking for groups, try to find a local group that has similar interests to what you have. Again, could be a church group, could be knitting or crocheting. My wife just started doing that, and it's very interesting, kind of some of the people she's met. Volunteering. That sometimes that could be a way to do it. Taking a news break for sure is going to be helpful, because the truth of the matter is news is meant to polarize you, to divide you. But the truth of the matter is most people might have a very strong opinion on like one topic, and then they'll say, oh, someone's crazy right or left or what have you. But the truth of the matter is most people on most things are near the center. Don't get caught up in it. Like, don't let it, if you can, do the best you can to kind of work around that. Okay. What's next here? I have them all in order here somewhere. Nasal breathing. I've literally done an entire course on why this is important. It's the Breathe Easy method. You could check it out. Breathing in and of itself is an exercise. It's also one of those things that folks, while everyone does it, as long as you are alive listening to this, you're breathing. The mechanics I see sometimes are very poor. And again, you could pick those up from poor posture, from how people present themselves. Like it's going to be very hard to breathe very well if your neck is kind of forward like this all the time and you're slouched over. So there's things you could pick up in posture, in how people present themselves, in their oral health, that can give you clues at how they sleep, can give you clues as to how you breathe. So breath, nasal breathing, I should say for sure, is how we should be breathing on a day-to-day basis, moving around in our environment most of the time. Ideally, you want to be breathing softly enough that the person next to you can't hear you. I would say that would be level one. Level two would be breathing softly enough so that you don't even hear your own breathing. And I would say level three, where you start getting into the mastery of it, is you breathe softly enough that you can't even feel yourself breathing in and out through your nose. So it should be light. It should be diaphragmatic. You should feel, if you put your hands on the bottom of your rib cage or on your abdomen, you should be able to feel that expansion. You should be able to feel the bottom of your rib cage expand outward on the sides. So, that is what true diaphragmatic breathing is. What it also does, because the diaphragm is effectively a pump, it's also going to improve the flow of lymph, blood, nervous flow, fascia, right? Because these are all connected. None of these things are separate. It's a unit. Even if you have a knee injury, how you breathe is important because that's going to impact nerve flow, lymph flow, blood flow, fascia flow, all four of them. So, and these are all connected because if you actually look, there's a fantastic book, and you could probably look up some lectures and stuff online. But if you haven't checked out Anatomy Trains by Tom Myers, you could probably look up some lectures on YouTube or what have you, but he shows you how all different muscles, all different parts of the body are actually connected by fascia, some of which actually include your diaphragm and your tongue. So, all of them, this is why all this stuff is important. And if you want to check where you're at from a breathing standpoint, there's an objective measurement you can use. I've talked about it before. It's called the control pause. And basically, what you're going to do is you're going to take a normal breath in and out through your nose. At the bottom of the breath, so after the exhale, you're going to pinch your nose and you're going to hold. And you're going to hold until you feel a strong urge to breathe or you start feeling a spasm in one of your muscles of the neck. If that measurement is less than 20 seconds, you have some work to do. Chances are, again, in my experience, there tends to be some sort of underlying health challenges. Could be sleep apnea or something breath related. It could be diabetes. It could be, heart disease. It could be some sort of other metabolic disorder. It could be liver disease, issues with the kidney. The names aren't necessarily as important, but what I do see is as you get over 20, as that breath improves and you get over 20, you're getting more oxygen to your tissues more efficiently. A lot of the real serious stuff tends to start easing up. So use that measurement, check where you're at, and then there's definitely some exercises you could do to improve your nasal breathing output, like box breathing, like I've put in a couple posts, triangle breathing, which is kind of a version of that, or the 4-8 method, which is another one that I like, where it's and you could do this throughout the day. You just want to consciously, again, slowly and under control. You don't want to heavy breath in, forced exhale out, slow for the count of 4 in, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then a passive exhale through the nose. So you're not forcing air out, you're slowly just letting it out for twice as long. So if 4 seconds in, 8 seconds out. If it's 3 seconds in, it's at least 6 seconds out. Really doesn't matter it could be 5 seconds in, 10 seconds out. It really is less important of what the specific times are. It's more important that the exhale is at least twice as long as the inhale. So that's kind of the marker you want in your head. So even if you count a little bit faster, your 4 is a little bit faster than my 4. As long as the 8 is at the same pace, should be all right. So that's breathing. Where's next? Sunlight and grounding. So connection to earth. This is very straightforward. As far as the what to do, the science of a lot of it, I've actually done multiple blog posts on. There's multiple videos on YouTube, on Instagram that I've done about this. I always find it funny that the sunlight posts are the ones that tend to be very polarizing, but it just comes to show you, at least me, just where the general public's mindset is on what the sun does. And you don't need to think about this very hard. There would literally be no life on Earth if it wasn't for the sun. If you just think about that, it doesn't take much to realize that the sun isn't trying to harm you or kill you or cause cancer, which it does not. Uh, it's an inability for us to adapt to it. And why do I feel that way? Why did I make the post about it yesterday? It's because it's so obvious. There is no, I'm looking at trees outside and chipmunks and squirrels and birds. None of these things get skin cancer or tumors. The only ones that do are the ones that we lock up in our houses or in our zoos. This does not happen out in nature. It does not happen if you live that type of lifestyle. We have become accustomed to a lifestyle that is not natural. So it takes time to build that back up. we live in an I want the answer, I want the solution right now. But the truth of the matter is, like, we have just been living so disconnected from nature that sometimes people do get burned because we're in front of blue lit screens and don't get the full wavelengths of infrared and UV on a regular basis. Or we live behind a window. I'm at a window. Guess what? This blocks UV and probably most of the infrared coming in. So even behind this window, I do not get the full spectrum of what the sun gives off. So and it's done under the guise of it's, more energy efficient or what have you. That's a story for another day. But point is, we have just become disconnected from nature. And we have very clear evidence that the less time you spend in the sun, the shorter your lifespan tends to be, of all causes. So, and we could go further into the skin cancer. Today's not the day for it, but what we do know that's very straightforward, and I shared a book yesterday. I don't know, but if I did a post a few days ago, if you read the book by Richard Hobday, the Healing Power of the Sun, I don't have it here anymore, or else I'd show it. He goes over it. Like there is no evidence that the sun directly causes melanoma. And what's interesting specifically with melanoma is most melanomas actually occur in places that don't necessarily get a lot of sunlight. So it'll be like in the armpits or someplace that isn't normally exposed to the sun. Curious if you think about it. So why the sun? Now I've talked about this. There's a guy, Niels Ryberg Fimson. He won a what's going on, Zim? How we doing? He won a Nobel Prize in 2003 for using UV light as a treatment for tuberculosis and smallpox. Won a Nobel Prize 121 years ago. We don't hear about it now because there was a major shift in the 1960s and 70s. And again, probably not the time to talk about it, but that was eventually the boom of the beginning, I should say, of bringing sunscreens in. I've talked about that in a different blog. But between him and Dr. Auguste Rollier, they treated thousands of people literally using sunlight, heliotherapy. That was what they called it, heliotherapy. This guy, Dr. Rollier, actually built sanitariums up on the mountains at higher elevations because you actually get more UV light for every, I think, 1,000 feet you are above sea level. It's another 4% of UV light that you get exposed to. So he would actually build his hospitals and sanitariums in places so that they can maximize sun exposure to help people who are healing. We don't learn about this now. Like, look, if you're sensitive to the sun, or maybe you're on medications that leave you more photosensitive, which is usually the case if you have photosensitivity, start in the morning, wear a hat, start without using sunglasses if you can, wear a hat if you can. Morning skin exposure is going to be a little bit more easier to adapt to, especially in the beginning. That infrared that you get, that's available, by the way, the entire time the sun is up in the sky, you can get that. The more skin exposure you get to that, build yourself up so that you can handle the more intense UV light during the peak hours of the day. You can do this even if you have light skin. You can do this. It does take time. It does take some work to get up to, but the more that you bring antioxidants into your life from grounding, from healthier foods, and eliminating the things that are going to cause more skin damage, like the seed oils and the conventional dairy and meats, etc., you're actually going to notice that your skin's going to respond better. You're not going to burn as quickly. It's not going to be an issue. We see this with using things like astaxanthin, which is a supplement that has a really high ORAC score, which is a convention used to measure the antioxidant power of a certain substance. Some people who supplement with astaxanthin actually will see that they don't burn as easily if they start taking it a few weeks before. So what does that mean? It's maybe we're not getting the antioxidant loads that we need at a rate that we should, and maybe that's why we're burning. It's not just the sun is trying to kill us because it doesn't like humans and it discriminates against humans. I promise you, that's not what happens. This is our own problem that we basically placed ourselves in. This is a modern human problem, and that's it. That's where I would start with the sun. Grounding is the other thing. Why? Because grounding, if you are connected to the earth, to the dirt, to the grass, to the sand, this is an unlimited supply of electrons that you can tap into at any given time, so long as you have bare skin attached to it. So living near a beach, going somewhere where you have grass or sand or access to sand or grass or dirt, and putting your hands on it, you're going to get access to virtually an unlimited supply of antioxidants, of electrons, right? Because what do electrons ultimately do? That's going to allow for the flow. That's going to allow, these are those, when you hear about acid alkyl imbalance, a lot of this is actually an electron and electrolyte imbalance. It all has to all do with electron donation and how these things move in the fascia, in the water inside of us, in the cells inside of us. That's what this all comes down to at the end of the day. So grounding, very powerful tool, super simple, that most people don't take advantage of. Sleep. I have a whole ebook on sleep. You could check it out, How to Get World-Class Sleep. This goes along with breathing. So again, part of my background is breath work and working with people who have sleep issues. How you breathe during this, part of this is also how I help my own sleep apnea. Now, some people, my wife is a dentist, for those of you who don't know, who works in the sleep medicine space. Yes, you can get, a mouth guard or what have you if you have bruxism or whatever's going on, sleep apnea, that can help. But the truth of the matter is a lot of it's going to come back to how you breathe as well. So what I said with breathing, with measuring the control pause and seeing where you're at, you'll notice as you get that above 20 to 30 to 40, the sleep apnea symptoms start going away too. It's pretty cool. That's exactly what happened to me. So how do you set up a sleep environment that's great? Well, first you need a routine and a sleep sanctuary. So I like the 3-2-1 method, which is no food 3 hours before bed, no liquids 2 hours before bed, no screens 1 hour before bed. Very straightforward, very easy. In the room itself, you want it cool. You want it dark. If you need blackout curtains, great. I would get rid of and unplug all electronic devices in your bedroom. This has to do more with non-native EMF exposure, especially at night. These things can also affect calcium channels in cells. What does that mean? Again, you're going to get electrolyte imbalances, cell issues, because calcium channels are all messed up from non-native EMF. So certainly shutting off your Wi-Fi at night would be a big thing. You also want to get consistent with your sleep and wake times. Ideally, well, I've talked about this before, and I'm very confident on this. Night owls do not exist. That's not a real thing. It is literally made up because we live lives that are in front of screens, that are in front of non-native lights. We have created this concept of night owls. This, again, does not happen in nature. You have nocturnal animals, sure, but you also have animals like human beings that are awake during the day, and they wind down and go to sleep at night. There are very few exceptions. There are actually none. There's some. What would you call a possum that you see out during the day? It's a rabid animal. It's not a healthy animal. You probably want to stay away from it. I even remember learning that when I was living in New York City. So, some of this is, and I get why this happens, because sometimes you don't want to make people feel bad, and it's a way to include everyone. But the truth of the matter is, when we say things to make people feel better at the expense of them getting better, that creates a bigger problem. For example, like, we now have studies that just blue light exposure at night raises cortisol, raises blood sugar levels, impairs your ability to make melatonin. So again, are you a night owl, or are you on screens all night that is literally inhibiting your ability to get to sleep? Something worth thinking about. Sun exposure. Guess what? The best way to reset your circadian rhythm and get your sleep cycle under control is to see the sun when it is up and to not be on screens when it is dark. It is that simple. Yes, we have blue blockers that have a place. But guess what? Even if you're on your phone, you could put on a red filter and you could use, at least on an iPhone, you could go through the accessibility options and make it as red as possible. Blue blockers, I use them at night occasionally, yes, but I would not put them on. I'm not going to sit here and say they're going to be really helpful if you leave all the overhead lights on and all that, because that's not going to happen. That's not going to work. But if it's a small screen for a small amount of time and it's already dim and you already have filters on it, then yes, it can be a helpful tool. It's not going to fix it. So important. Hydration. We already talked about some of this. We definitely want nasal breathing is going to be a part of that. Why? It's going to increase oxygen flow, oxygen capacity. Non-native EMFs, we already talked about. Artificial light, already talked about. Clean water, really important. So no fluoride, no chlorine in your water. Get a water filter that can be helpful with it. Also, if you want to get that electrolyte balance up, where do those electrolytes come from? It's primarily fruits and vegetables. It is that simple. I'm really less concerned about which ones. I would shoot for at least 10 servings a day. And I know I'm moving on, getting into the next section, which is probably where we should go. So, nutrition. I'm going to keep this really simple. Why? Because we could go deeper if people really want to go into it. But the truth of the matter is, I know I'm not going to change a lot of people's opinions as far as what is best. I certainly have an opinion on that. But the truth of the matter is, you can make a massive improvement with most people by just trending in the right direction. Now, where is that direction? I basically already told you. My blanket, bare minimum that we should shoot for across the board is 10 servings of fruits and vegetables per day. Why? We already know, and again, I'm going to use some American numbers, but somewhere between 60 and 80-ish% of Americans are what? Magnesium deficient. Where is mostly your magnesium found? Surprise, it's fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, etc. Most of these things that you see nutrient deficiencies for, by the way, at least in typical Americans, are found in a lot of these plant foods. I also know that 95% of Americans don't even reach the RDA levels of fruits and vegetable intake, which is 5 servings a day. That is why, bare minimum. Also, from a hydration standpoint, what is hydration at the end of the day? It's not just how much water you drink. It's how is that water structured in your body? It's how does the water you get from this bottle, how does that act in your body? That has more to do, again, with the magnesium, the calcium, the sodium, the potassium, these electrolytes that allow for flow in the body, that allow for electron flow, that allow for the ability of these water molecules to attach, or not attach, but interface with fascia and other proteins to allow electrons to flow at a faster rate or a better rate, a more efficient rate, right? That's the short answer. How you want to fill in around that, I will leave up to you, but I will say that is the bare minimum, and that is the one thing that I push for people now. So, and again, where do you start? Start with the ones that you'll eat. Certainly there are specifics depending on what's going on. For example, like if there's some liver challenges, maybe you want to use more bitter ones, arugula, different herbs, lemon, things of that nature. If it's kidney challenges, maybe you want to include more red foods. Maybe you want some beets. Maybe you want some parsley and cilantro. There you can get into that. Citrus, also great for that, for lymphatic flow too. So, bare minimum, can you get to that? Yes, you want ideally organic. What are the things you want to avoid? Very simple. If man makes it, do not eat it. So a lot of these processed seed oils, a lot of the conventional dairy and gluten and meats and all that stuff, just stay away from it. And the truth of the matter is, the more you stay away from that stuff, that's going to do more than actually what you add in. And I know sometimes that's going to frustrate a lot of people, but we make more progress when we shed the things we don't need than when we add things in. It's just the truth of what it is. That's what I've seen. Okay. Finally, movement. Obviously, so there's so many benefits to movement, and it's not as important as some of the stuff we already mentioned. but it is key. And again, for fascia flow, for nerve flow, for lymph flow, for blood flow, that's why I put it second, because all of these things are connected to everything else that we talked about. This isn't necessarily prescriptive because everyone has different needs, but what I will say is if you want a generally good movement plan, so I don't love exercise plan personally, but it needs to include some form of strengthening, some sort of aerobic activity, and some sort of flexibility and mobility movement. So some of those overlap, right? Like flexibility, mobility, and strengthening can be achieved in a yoga class. So, you know, there's a lot of different ways you could do it. Aerobic and strengthening can happen in something like plyometrics or, a Tabata type protocol. If you don't know what that is, you can look it up. But like, there's a lot of overlap for this. And what I will say, there is no best exercise. It depends, again, on the context. Are you recovering from an injury? Because then there's certain things we could do. Are you looking to perform better? I go through a whole screen with people. So, we could assess where the strengths and weaknesses are and then address, okay, these are what we can do to get that up to do better. Right. So that's a big part of it too. But like, if you're looking like for like, when in doubt, I would say opt for natural movements. So walking, sprinting, yes, in a straight line, but maybe around cones, maybe around chairs, maybe around bushes, trees, hula hoops, changing direction, right? Uh, Gymnast type moves or animal type moves. What does that mean? Crab walks, bear crawls, rolling, somersaults. All those are great. Jumping, hopping over rocks, over branches, over tree stumps, over hurdles, over cones. Include some of that. Climb. This is the one thing that I think most people, at least most modern folks, climbing or hanging. Hanging is a big one. Grip strength, shoulder health, shoulder mobility. Hanging is a big one. Jumping or jumping rope. Lifting or carrying. So think farmers carries or groceries or two-hand carries, right? Two-arm carries. And then throwing, either for distance or uh, at a target, right? So a baseball, a football, a rock, a stone, skipping rocks. It really doesn't matter. But like, the natural movements are going to be a great place to start because anyone can do most of these things if you just kind of put in the time. And guess what? You could do it while grounding and getting sunlight and hydrating. And a lot of these things start to come together. So those are the 8. Those are the essential 8s for building a healthy foundation. And I will continue to say this, like 90 to 95% of the people, if they do those 8 things, will get better with time with no other intervention. Certainly it helps to have a guide. Certainly it helps to have some direction if you need it. And sometimes we need an objective third party to kind of tell you. I get it. I believe me, I do. But so much of the healing process happens outside of an office. Now, certainly some happens in. And this is why it's so important to really vet who you work with. And I get, like, if you're in the American insurance model, you're kind of told who you're going to work with. But I think, like, if you're recovering from an injury or you're, trying to get better, I think you should vet who you work with the same way you would vet a mechanic or a contractor, right? Like, you want to know what these people can do if they can help you for where you want to get. And that includes obviously me. So, one of the things that I'm doing, I guess I'll announce this right now, is like, if you're in Saratoga County, in New York, I am doing house calls, whether it's for sports performance, whether it's for chiropractic. If you want to work with me, you can either DM me on this or send me an email and I could send you something to schedule, and we could certainly get something done in person. So it could be done, in a park. It could be done at your house. Uh, if you're in the area and that's something that sounds interesting to you, then feel free to reach out to me. I could certainly do that. So we come up with a specific plan for you. It will be custom for you, depending on your goals, on your wants, on your needs. And then you will have me in your corner for all of the services, for the chiropractic, for the soft tissue, for the if muscle testing is something you want, or red light therapy, or an exercise program, which everyone gets, by the way. So, if you're in the area and you're looking for someone, I will do that. So feel free to reach out for that. If that is not something you're looking for at the moment, then feel free to join my newsletter. Right now, it's going to be in Saratoga County. There might be some updates for that in the future, but that's what it is right now. Yeah, join the newsletter, Becoming Invincible. There's new stuff every day. There's going to be a new one tomorrow. Yeah, I hope you guys have a great weekend. See you guys soon.